Welcome back to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. I'm your host, Don Magruder, and we're in our second segment. And we have Dave Pierce from DriRite Emergency Services. And if you're watching us today, you're doing so on LSTV, Lake Sumter Television, courtesy of Red Apples Media on Comcast 13, Bright House 498, and cable channel number 4. And of course, if you're listening to us, it's my 790 AM WLBE in beautiful Leesburg, Florida. Dave Pierce from DriRite Emergency Services. Their business is mold remediation plus water remediation. And Dave, why don't you take a few minutes and tell our listeners about DriRite Emergency Services, where you locate, the areas you service, because y'all cover most of Central Florida, don't you?
That's correct. We cover most of the state of Florida. We're located in Winter Garden, Florida. We cover about 70% of the state of Florida. We cover the villages, Leesburg, Orlando, Tampa, Miami. It really doesn't matter. We'll go anywhere. We have offices in Jacksonville, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, Winter Garden. We cover pretty much anywhere Central Florida. We do water damage, mold remediation, fire and smoke damage. Our main core of our business is structural drying, the water damage portion. I am a state licensed mold remediator.
And let me sort of dive in here just a minute.
Sure.
A lot of people have an aspect of water intrusions in the home or whatever through a damaged roof or through a broken window or an accident or a fire. But a big part of water intrusion issues in the state of Florida are what I call hidden water intrusions. In other words, you have a window that was installed incorrectly, a door installed incorrectly, something done, and for maybe 6 months or a year there's been water draining in your house. Those are issues you also deal with, aren't they?
That is correct. And that's where it gets kind of really tricky with the insurance. A lot of the insurance companies now are writing in the policy where if you don't report it within 15 days, it might not be a covered loss. Even though it's hidden and accidental and you don't realize it's leaking, you have to be really careful and really aware of your insurance policy. One thing a lot of people do when they get their insurance, they want to get the most bang for their buck, try to cut cost, which is really not a good thing to do on your largest investment.
Oh, I agree.
Most policies, without sounding bad as far as the insurance company, but they're a business, they're in business to make money. So they're going to try to minimize the loss. They're going to try to do whatever they can to get out of paying it, I guess would be the best way to put it. Most of them do the right thing, but the policies are really tricky anymore. Not like it was 20, 30 years ago. So when you have your agent write your policy, you have to be real careful to make sure that you're getting the coverage you really need. Make sure they explain it to you so you're covered for a water loss. For instance, flood damage versus water damage.
Right.
A flood is people, my house is flooded. That's the wrong terminology to use with the insurance company.
Right, because that goes back to flood insurance.
Right. Where, flood insurance is groundwater coming into the house from outside.
Right.
So if you say that, automatically the insurance company's thinking, okay, you have a, pool that's overflowed or a river or whatever, and you're not a covered loss.
Okay. How can someone contact you, give you a call or a website to check your services out?
They can call us we have a local number, it's 407-654-0303. After hours, that number is actually transferred to our project manager, so you're actually speaking to a knowledgeable individual that is they are a member of the staff. It's not an answering service. They can also go on www.DriRite.net, and then we also have a 1-800 number, which is 1-800-493-8784.
Okay.
But the website has a lot of good information. They can go on there and check out our services that way.
Let's talk about, first off, in the state of Florida, we have so much rain and so much storms. what are the most common ways people are seeing water intrusions happen in their house? As you look through Central Florida and Lake and Sumter County, where are you seeing water come in the most?
Most of the time, it's not what you would think. It's not a roofing issue. It's not a window issue. It's not a stucco crack, although those do happen. Most of the time, it's the wash machine supply hose. You know, a lot of people, they change out the wash machine, the hoses look good, they don't replace them, and then 6 months later, the hose breaks. We have that. We have the supply lines for toilets that are a big issue. Mostly it's plumbing issues that we see a lot of.
And the problem is, if you have a flood, water damage in your home from something like that, if it's allowed to stay moist for any time, that's going to create a mold issue, isn't it?
It possibly can. Mold is here. I mean, you're breathing it in right now. It's a living, thing. It's always there. There's no way to really truly eliminate it completely. So it just requires the right ingredients: temperature, moisture content, and a food source.
If someone has a water issue in their home, how do you handle differently a water issue from a broken pipe versus a roof or a window leak, a long-term leak? How do you handle those differently?
Well, every one of them's a little bit different. In 30 years of doing this, no two jobs are really the same.
Okay.
As far as a roofing issue, one thing we would recommend is have a roofer come out, tarp the roof, or repair it. Then you would go in, you'd remove whatever wet materials need to be removed, insulation, drywall, whatever. If it's a supply line, we would go in, extract the water, remove carpet and padding, baseboards, drywall, whatever needs to be removed. Our goal is to dry the structure of the house, not so much the carpet, the drywall. We want to dry the bones of the house.
And that's an interesting point, because I've been through some major hurricanes. In fact, family had a lot of damage during Katrina, and a lot of the people tried to dry houses out themselves, and
Right.
some hire professionals like you. What's the difference between someone trying to do it themselves and hiring a professional? What are some of the things they're going to miss?
Well, for one, how are you truly going to know that the place is dry?
Right.
We use scientific technology to determine whether it's wet or dry. We use infrared technology, we use moisture meters, we use a variety of different tools to ensure that it's dry when we're complete with our process. As an individual, you can go to one of these rental places, rent the equipment, and dry it out yourself, or you think it's dry. But how do you really know that the place is dry when you're done and you remove the equipment? You really don't.
Mm-hmm. And the more moisture and heat that's in the walls or in the carpet or whatever, the better chance you're going to have with mold, isn't it?
Well, not necessarily. I've been into places that's been wet for 6 months and there's no mold.
Oh, really?
I've been into places that's been wet for 6 hours and look like a chia pet.
Wow.
So there's really no rhyme or reason as far as, it's just the right conditions.
All right, if you have a water emergency in your home, how do most insurance companies handle it? For example, say tonight someone comes home and they've been on vacation and their hot water heater tank breaks. They flood the house and they've got an inch of water in the house. How are your insurance companies in general going to handle something like that?
Well, again, I don't want to badmouth anybody. They're gonna tell you first and foremost, get rid of the water. Do whatever you need to do. If they think it's actual a water damage that requires a professional come out, they'll try to push you towards their own company or
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, their preferred vendors list. But in your policy, it says for you to take the precautionary measures to prevent any secondary damage.
Okay.
So you have to act in a timely manner and try to remove as much water or damaged materials as you can to prevent any secondary damage. That's one thing. Again, you can use whoever you want to. You don't have to use their preferred vendor. Just what I would recommend is you use whoever you feel comfortable with, who gives you the best peace of mind. But the main thing is to to start the emergency services as quickly as possible to minimize any secondary damages.
All right. Obviously, you work with a lot of insurance companies and a lot of
Yes.
insurance policies. Better choice. What's some tips that you've picked up along the way people should consider when they're working with their insurance companies in a situation where they have water intrusion issues?
I'd say probably the main thing is, one, whenever you're getting the policy, to make sure that you have the correct coverages. Even if you're not in a flood zone, it's not always a bad idea to get flood insurance. If you have a pool in your backyard and you get a lot of rain and that pool overflows and water comes into the house, if you don't have flood insurance, you're not covered. So you could have a lot of damage from that you're not covered for. The other thing is just make sure you're not minimizing your expense on the insurance. My house is basically overinsured. I have more coverage than I need on everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is just whoever the insurance company is, make sure that you have the correct coverages and you get the most bang for your buck per se.
Romac Lumber is your authorized Owens corn dealer for Lake and Sumter counties. If you want to see the full line of OC shingles, stop by Romac Lumber in the Villages at 722 Duck Lake Road, or Romac Lumber in Mount Dora at 2411 Old Highway 441. And if you have issues and you want with financing, check out Romac's home install financing program. If you qualify, you could have your roof installed with 1 monthly program. For more information, you can call Romac Lumber in the Villages at 352-753-3333. That's 352-753-3333. Live in the state of Florida. The weather's hot, the moisture, and with the moisture and the mold spores in our air, you're going to have mold. Isn't one of the problems in the state of Florida, mold is just about everywhere?
Well, it is. I mean, like I say, we're breathing it right now. Mold is everywhere. You're not going to get rid of it. It just requires that right combination, the food supply, the moisture, and the right environment.
Now, for example, mold has become a four-letter word, literally.
Yes.
And people think that you can't have mold anywhere, but if you go inside any home today, you're going to find mold, aren't you?
Oh, yes. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Now, during the big mold and drywall issues, and we still have a lot of it, they found out one of the sources of mold is when drywall got wet or whatever, that the paper on the back of the drywall was the main food source for the mold.
Right, paper, wood, cellulose type material.
Right, and that created a lot of the black mold, or the real dangerous mold, as they said. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I know there's different things, but I guess what I'm trying to drive at, if you do not allow it to have a food source, and if it doesn't have moisture, even though you can have mold, most of the time you will not. True?
Well, that's kind of you can't really eliminate the food source entirely.
Right.
And you can't get rid of mold. You just have to make sure you maintain your air conditioning. Keep it below 80 degrees. Don't shut it off when you leave to go on vacation. Make sure you maintain the environment in the home that's comfortable for you, and not to make the mold grow, basically.
Okay. We're getting into the summer now, as we've talked about. Let's say someone goes on vacation and pipe breaks in a wall, and for 2 weeks it's flooding the house. They're going to call DriRite, and what number are they going to call?
The 407-654-0303.
All right, when they call you, what's going to happen? What are you going to do?
Well, first of all, the project manager who answers the phone, they're going to ask them a series of questions. They're also going to give them some advice as to what they can do in the meantime. It takes a few minutes to get the information, call the crew that is on call. We typically have a couple of crews on call. They'll be dispatched. Then they'll come out, they'll extract water, they'll do whatever is necessary.
Okay, now do you have recommendations? For example, say a pipe is busted. they're going to need to stop the water source first before you come out, or do you have recommendations for plumbers and stuff?
We do. We can offer contacts for any portion of the build back.
Okay, so the first thing is they've got to stop the water
Right.
source.
Shut off, if they can, shut off the water.
Okay, so they've called you, they've shut the water source off, and you're going to call a crew, and what's going to happen from then?
The crew will come out, they'll sign a work authorization, and that's just allowing us to provide services. Typically, we bill the insurance company directly,
Okay,
so there's no out-of-pocket expense to them. All the billing is done on a program that's the insurance companies have devised, so it's all their pricing.
Mhm.
So whether you have us come in or Serpro or any of the other companies come in, the pricing is pretty much the same. It might vary a little bit here and there, but we're all pretty much the same pricing.
okay, so you're going to come in there, and say you have an inch of water. What are you going to actually do in the home?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is anything that can cause second or sustain secondary damage, computers, paper products, we're going to get that up out of the water. Then we're going to start extracting water. Typically, we work in a two-man team. So one person is going to go around and start getting any sensitive items up out of the water. The other person is going to start extracting. Once they get the bulk of the water removed, then we're going to remove padding or carpet, block the furniture up, just so it's not what we call wicking, is where the water is wicking up
Right.
into the furniture. We put it on styrofoam blocks just so that doesn't happen. Another thing we'll do is we'll remove baseboards, puncture holes in the drywall, and aerate the walls. That gets air movement into the wall cavity to dry it out from the inside.
What action do you take at that time to prevent mold from growing, where the house doesn't become like a mold chia pet? Do y'all take action to do that?
Well, that's all part of the process. It's maintaining the temperature and getting the house dry as quickly as possible. Once you can control the environment, you're typically not going to have any mold growth.
Okay. All right. Say someone's had an issue, they've gotten it repaired, but they now have mold. Or let's take it to another step. Someone's looking to buy or sell a home. There's mold in the home that they're buying or selling, or maybe even foreclosed home. Can you guys come in there and do something with the mold in most of these homes, or is that something a complete tear out? Or what type of mold remediation services do you offer along those lines?
Well, as far as there's no magical chemical that's going to get rid of mold.
Mm-hmm.
To eliminate it, you're either going to have to remove the affected materials. If it's drywall, carpet, baseboards, that's either going to have to be removed, or basically it's going to have to be removed. Carpet can be cleaned if it's not that impacted. As far as the structure, the wood, that can be sanded and treated. We use a product that basically it's a mildewcide. It doesn't kill the mold per se, but it'll prevent it from coming back as long as it's maintained correctly.
Okay. Now, you mentioned this earlier. What is the difference between structural drying and dehumidification?
Well,
and surface drying?
Dehumidification, that's basically what your air conditioner does in your home.
Okay.
It dehumidifies the air, pulls the moisture out, maintains a comfortable living environment. Structural drying is actually drying all of the building materials in the home. So it's getting it down to an industry standard where everything is dry. Drywall has a certain dry standard. Different wood products have different dry standards. Concrete has a different dry standard. So there's a lot of variables that go into structural drying versus just dehumidification.
A lot of the structural products started out wet, including lumber.
Correct.
Of course, they kill dry lumber, bricks, and all this stuff. A product that's been structurally dried, I know you can't say with all certainty, but for the most part, still retains its structural integrity, doesn't it?
For the most part, yeah. It depends on how long it's been wet, what kind of material it is. Drywall, for instance, it can get wet and still maintain its structural integrity. It just depends on how long it's been wet, how much the saturation point is, how quickly it was dried. So there's variables to it.
When you look at mold remediation, what's some of the toughest things you do to remediate rope? In other words, when you go in someone's house and they have a mold issue, what are some of the toughest jobs that you see these days?
Dealing with the insurance company.
Oh, really?
Well, most insurance companies, they have a cap on what they'll cover. A lot of times that's not a realistic amount. So you might come into a house, the people's been gone for a couple of weeks on vacation.
Okay.
Water heater bursts, floods the house out. They have, let's say $60,000 worth of damage, and they have a $10,000 cap. It goes back to what came first, the mold or the water damage.
Okay.
So that's always a battle. But I mean, contents are a big issue. Just simply because you go in, women's, for instance, shoes can be very expensive. Leather products, leather coats, that can be very expensive. And to get it cleaned correctly and get the mold removed can be very challenging.
We're having a great conversation with Dave Pierce. He's with DriRite Emergency Services. We're talking about water and mold remediation. Unfortunately, in the state of Florida, with all the rain and such we have these days, it's sort of a big deal. Dave, the other thing is, a lot of times people don't know where the water's coming in from in their house. In other words, I can't tell you how many times they've looked up and seen a spot in the ceiling or something, or a floor wet, and they don't know where it's coming. Do you have means or ways of helping people find and locate the water intrusion sources?
We can. We actually do cause and origin reports. We do a lot of work for builders, and that's a lot of the core of what we do for them. For instance, water seeks the path of least resistance. So like you say, you see a spot on the ceiling, you think the roof is leaking right over that spot, and it might actually be 20 feet away. So we do have the equipment that a lot of times we can pinpoint where it's coming from.
Dave, I know that you guys have done a lot of water repair work and water remediation in projects that in which there's long-term water intrusions through windows and doors and such like that. That offers a unique problem these days, doesn't it?
Oh, of course.
Because there's a lot of homes that are literally rotting in the state of Florida because they were built wrong, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I know that's part of, y'all see the mold issues, you try to mitigate some of that stuff. For example, if the window's not taped properly and installed properly, you'll have water come into those things.
Yes.
And
stucco cracks.
Stucco cracks, and let's talk a little bit about that. For the bottom of most people have a feeling that a concrete block home is with stucco on the outside is the cat's meow, but there's two things in the world or three things in the world that's true. You're going to die, you're going to pay taxes, and concrete will crack.
Correct.
And when concrete block and stucco cracks and you don't have the right paint on there, you can actually have water come in your house, can't you?
Oh, definitely. And most blocks have that hollow, core in it, that cell. And you can have a water leak that's been, or water intrusion that's been leaking for 6 months, and that cell fills up with water, and it finally gets to a point where it's saturated, and the water releases, and now you have a couple of gallons of water in your house.
Plus a solid poured block wall, they have issues because they'll wick just like a sponge, won't they?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen mold issues with that, haven't you?
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
But one of the biggest problems I see in the state of Florida in construction-wise is a block bottom with a wood second floor with stucco on the outside.
Correct.
Talk to us about some of the problems specifically with that.
Well, one thing, the stucco terminology, as you know, the first floor is typically a cementatious finish.
Right.
It's really not stucco. The second floor on a wood frame is true stucco. Again, wood flexes, you have cracks, they have the house wrap around it. But a lot of times, depending on the time of the day and the way the sun shines, you don't see those cracks. So you could have a crack in the finish that's been there for a couple of months, and you're not realizing water's gotten in there until the damage is done. I'm not an engineer or a contractor, so I can't say what's beneficial to fix that. But we do see a lot of problems with it.
As someone who remediates mold, I don't see, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't see your business getting any slower anytime soon.
No, not. I mean, there's challenges every day. A lot of it is, insurance regulations. Hopefully, the builders will build a better house, and they won't have the water intrusion problems, which is good for homeowners, not good for me so much. But hopefully they'll change their products.
But I guess the bottom line is there's a lot of homes being constructed every day that eventually will allow moisture to come in, and that's where you guys will get your work from.
Yes.
Moisture coming in through windows and doors are not done, blocks not sealed correctly, incorrect paints. Those are huge areas where mold will come in.
Well, water intrusion.
Water
yes.
intrusion,
Yes.
which will help create mold. Now, talk a little bit about the certifications you guys have and how your technicians are certified, because that's sort of a big deal, isn't it?
Well, it is. One thing we do is we have a training process for all our technicians. Basically, when you're hired to work for us, everybody starts out at the same starting point. We don't hire somebody off the street from another company to be a technician. Everybody starts off as a helper. They go through their probationary period. If they are what they say they are, then they can advance up. If not, they're going to continue to be trained until they do it our way. One thing I've found is, you can get all the certification in the world, and that doesn't mean anything if you don't do it correctly.
Right.
So we do value the IICRC, which is the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Certification. That is one of the certifications that we like to have all of our technicians adhere to and get trained in.
Good. Now, the lead time, if someone were to call you today, and what number should they call you?
407-654-0303.
And if someone called you today, what's the lead time for you guys coming out and working with them?
Typically an hour or less. It depends on traffic, but typically an hour or less. That's what we strive for.
Well, Dave Pierce of DriRite, we want to thank you for being our guest today. We learned a lot about water intrusion and mold, and it's great information. Plus, want to remind our listeners to catch Around the House, the column, Wednesdays in the South Lake Press and Saturdays in the Daily Commercial. And as always, catch us every Monday from noon until 1 p.m. right now on WLB in Leesburg, Florida. Till next week, we will see you around the house.